I'm 78 years old, and this is the first time I'm saying this out loud without apologizing for it. For 60 years, I did everything right, or at least everything I was told was right. I was the perfect woman, perfect wife, perfect mother, perfect employee, perfect daughter, perfect friend, and it cost me my life. I don't mean that I'm dead. I mean that I never truly lived. Not once in all those decades did I wake up and ask myself what I wanted because I was too busy being what everyone else needed. Here's the confession that still tightens my chest at night. I don't regret one bad decision. I regret never making my own. I swallowed my anger so I wouldn't seem difficult. I buried my dreams so I wouldn't seem selfish. I smiled through exhaustion because good women don't complain, right? People praised me constantly. You're so strong. You're so reliable. You're such a good woman. What they didn't see, what I didn't want them to see, was how invisible I felt inside my own life. And here's the part that scares me the most. I didn't realize what I was doing wrong while I was doing it. I thought this was just what adulthood was. I thought the emptiness was normal. It wasn't until much later, much too late, that I understood the truth. There was one belief I carried for decades, one rule I never questioned, and it quietly stole 60 years from me. But what happened next, what finally opened my eyes, changed everything I thought I knew about love, sacrifice, and being good. And I need to tell you this before it's too late for you too. I grew up believing there was a formula to being a good woman, not written down anywhere, no handbook, but everyone seemed to know it, so I learned by watching. I was born in 1947, the second of 4 children, in a small, tidy house where everything had its place, including people. My mother woke up at 5:30 every morning without an alarm. Breakfast was on the table by 6. My father's shirts were always ironed, his shoes always polished. And my mother, she was always tired. But she never said that word out loud. She used to tell me, a woman's job is to keep things running smoothly, not to be happy, not to be fulfilled, just smooth. If there was tension, she absorbed it. If someone was unhappy, she adjusted herself. If something went wrong, she blamed herself. And everyone called her a wonderful woman. So I learned early, love was something you earned through usefulness. At school, I was the quiet, dependable girl, the one teachers trusted, the one who stayed after to help clean the chalkboard. I didn't cause trouble. I didn't ask for much. I didn't even raise my hand unless I was absolutely sure I was right. By the time I was 22, I was married. By 24, I had my first child. By 30, I had 2 children, a mortgage, and a calendar filled with other people's needs. From the outside, my life looked like success. We owned a 3-bedroom home. My husband worked steady hours. I clipped coupons, packed lunches, balanced the checkbook down to the penny. I volunteered at school twice a week. I remembered birthdays. I sent thank you cards. I never forgot an anniversary. I was exhausted, but I told myself that meant I was doing it right. Every time I felt a quiet discomfort, an ache I couldn't name, I pushed it aside. When I dreamed of going back to school at 35, I told myself it was impractical. When I wanted a day alone at 42, I told myself it was selfish. When I felt resentment creeping in at 50, I told myself to be grateful. Grateful women don't complain. Good women endure.
That phrase, "good women endure," became my internal anthem, and people rewarded me for it.
My boss trusted me with extra work because I never said no. My family leaned on me because I was so capable. My friends vented for hours because I was a good listener. Do you see the pattern? Every yes earned me praise. Every silence earned me approval. Every sacrifice earned me the label I was addicted to. Good. But here's what no one tells you about being the reliable one. No one checks on the strong person. No one asks what the accommodating person needs.
And eventually, no one expects you to have limits at all. By the time I was in my late 50s, my days felt like a loop. Wake up, do what needed to be done, collapse into bed, repeat. Years passed that way, quietly, efficiently, numbly. And yet, if you had asked me then whether anything was wrong, I would have smiled and said, "No, everything's fine." That was the most dangerous lie I ever told myself, because beneath that fine exterior, something was shrinking, a voice, a self,
a sense of me that I kept postponing for later. I told myself later when the kids are grown, later when things slow down, later when it's my turn. But what I didn't realize, what no one warned me about, was that later has a way of disappearing. And then one ordinary moment, one conversation I almost didn't pay attention to, forced me to finally see what all those years of being perfect had actually taken from me. But what happened next changed everything. It happened on a Tuesday.
Not a birthday, not a holiday, just a plain, forgettable Tuesday, which somehow makes it worse. I was 63 years old. I was sitting in a beige waiting room that smelled faintly of disinfectant and burnt coffee. The clock on the wall ticked loudly, each second exaggerated, almost accusatory. I had taken my husband to a routine appointment. Nothing serious. We'd done this 100 times before. I remember flipping through a magazine I wasn't reading when the nurse called his name. Not mine, his.
I followed him into the room like I always did, sat quietly in the corner, hands folded, back straight, invisible. The doctor asked him questions. How do you feel? Any pain? Any changes lately? Then the doctor turned to me and said casually, almost as an afterthought, "And how about you? Everything okay?" I opened my mouth to answer automatically, "Yes, I'm fine." The words were already forming, muscle memory really, but something strange happened. Nothing came out. My throat tightened. My chest felt heavy. I could hear my own heartbeat in my ears. The room suddenly felt too small, like the walls were inching closer. The doctor waited. My husband looked at me confused. "Are you all right?" he asked. And for the first time in decades, I didn't know how to respond. I wasn't sick. I wasn't injured. But I wasn't all right either. Tears welled up before I could stop them. Silent ones. Embarrassing ones. The kind that come when something inside you finally breaks from being held together too long. "I don't know," I whispered. "I honestly don't know." The room went quiet. The doctor nodded slowly. Not impatient, not uncomfortable, just present. Then he asked a question no one had ever asked me so directly before. "What do you do for yourself?" I laughed. A short, hollow sound. "I take care of my family," I said. I always have." He smiled gently and shook his head. "No," he said. "I didn't ask what you do for others. I asked what you do for you." My mind went completely blank, not because I was hiding the answer, but because there was no answer to find. I was 63 years old, and I couldn't name a single thing that belonged just to me. No hobby I hadn't abandoned, no dream I hadn't delayed, no space in my life that wasn't functional, useful, or justified by someone else's needs. In that moment, something cracked open inside me.
All those years I had told myself, this is what love looks like. All those years I had worn exhaustion like a badge of honor. All those years of waiting patiently for my turn. And suddenly, the truth was impossible to ignore. There was no turn coming because I had trained everyone, including myself, to believe I didn't need one. On the drive home, neither of us spoke. The radio played softly, some song I used to love when I was younger. I remember dancing in my bedroom at 17, doors closed, dreaming about a life that felt wide and full. I gripped the steering wheel and felt something sharp and unfamiliar rise in my chest. Grief, not for a person, but for a version of myself I had slowly erased. That night I lay awake replaying moments I had dismissed as small. The promotion I turned down because it would disrupt the family. The trip I never took because it felt indulgent.
The countless times I said, "It's fine," when it wasn't. I realized then that my biggest mistake wasn't choosing others. It was choosing others instead of myself every single time. But what hurt the most, the part that still makes my voice shake, is this: no one forced me to disappear. I volunteered. And once I saw that, once I truly understood it, there was no going back. Because awareness changes the weight of regret. And from that night forward, I had to sit with a terrifying question. Was there still time left? Or had I already given it all away? When you reach a certain age, regret doesn't arrive loudly. It doesn't crash through the door or announce itself with drama. It settles in quietly, like dust. It coats ordinary moments. Sitting at the kitchen table, folding laundry, watching the sun go down through a window you've looked through for decades.
And suddenly you realize you are grieving time, not because it passed, but because of how you spent it. For months after that doctor's appointment, I kept asking myself the same question in different forms. Who am I when no one needs me? And every version of the question scared me, because I had built my entire identity around being necessary. Here is the first truth I learned the hard way. Being needed is not the same as being valued. I confused the two for most of my life. When people needed me, I felt secure. When they relied on me, I felt important. When they praised my sacrifices, I felt worthy. But none of that required them to actually see me. Being the perfect woman meant being endlessly adjustable, flexible, accommodating, quietly resilient, like furniture, useful, reliable, taken for granted. And here is the cruel part. No one sets out to use you this way. They simply respond to the version of you that keeps showing up.
Every time I said, "It's okay," when it wasn't, I trained people to believe my discomfort didn't matter. Every time I said, "I don't mind," when I did, I erased a boundary. Every time I put myself last, I confirmed my place in line. Over time, my life became very efficient and very small. You see, sacrifice without limits doesn't make you noble. It makes you invisible. That was my second lesson. I used to think love meant self-erasure.
That being a good woman meant shrinking so others could feel comfortable. That wanting more was a flaw to be managed. But love that requires you to disappear is not love. It's a transaction, and I paid with decades. Now, if you're younger and listening to this, you might be thinking, but I don't feel like I have a choice. I thought that too. Responsibility is real. Bills are real. Children, partners, parents, they all need things from you. I'm not telling you to abandon them. I'm telling you this: do not abandon yourself in the process, because here is the quiet danger no one warns you about. When you silence yourself long enough, you forget how to speak. When you ignore your desires long enough, they stop knocking. And when you postpone your life long enough, you start calling the waiting maturity. That's the lie I lived under. I told myself I was being patient. I told myself I was being responsible. I told myself my time would come. But time does not come.
It only goes. The most painful realization wasn't that I made sacrifices. It was that I never asked who I was becoming through them. Life doesn't just pass. It shapes you quietly through repetition. And when the repetition is self-denial, the shape it leaves behind is hollow. By the time I noticed the emptiness, I had already internalized another belief that kept me stuck. It's too late to change. That belief is seductive. It keeps you obedient. It keeps you small.
But here's the truth, spoken from someone who has lived long enough to test it. It is rarely too late to begin, but it is often too late to recover what you never protected. I did start making changes, slowly. I learned to say no without explaining. I took walks alone. I enrolled in a class at 65 and felt foolish and alive at the same time. But even as I reclaimed pieces of myself, I carried the weight of knowing how much earlier I could have done this. And that is why I am speaking to you now.
Because wisdom gained late still has value, but wisdom applied early can save a life. And in the next part, I need to speak to you directly, not gently, not abstractly, urgently, because if you recognize yourself in my story, then you are standing closer to the edge than you think. And I don't want you to learn this lesson the way I did. If you take nothing else from my story, take this. Do not wait to be chosen to choose yourself.
I spent most of my life believing permission would arrive someday. Permission to rest. Permission to want more. Permission to take up space without earning it first. It never came because the world doesn't reward quiet self-erasure with freedom. It rewards it with more demands. So I am asking you, no, I am warning you, don't make my mistake. If you are in your 20s, listen carefully. The habits you are forming now will become your identity later.
Every time you silence yourself to keep the peace, you are practicing disappearance. If you are in your 40s, hear this truth without flinching. Your exhaustion is not a personal failure. It is often a sign that your life is out of balance in a way that will not fix itself. If you are in your 60s or older, I want you to know something important. It is not selfish to want a life that still feels like yours. It is human.
Here is something I wish someone had told me when I still had more years ahead than behind. Love that only flows outward will drain you dry. A life built only on obligation will eventually feel like a cage. and being good at the expense of being whole is not virtue, it is loss. So what do you do differently? You start small, but you start now. Say one honest sentence this week instead of a polite lie. Protect 1 hour that belongs only to you.
Stop explaining your boundaries like they are apologies. When someone is disappointed because you chose yourself, let them be disappointed. Discomfort is not danger. Disapproval is not catastrophe. You are allowed to be complex. You are allowed to want more than survival. You are allowed to take up space without justifying it. I used to think strength meant endurance. I know now that real strength is honesty with yourself first.
And here is the final truth, the one I wish I had understood sooner. No one is coming to give you your life back. You have to claim it. I am 78 years old. I cannot reclaim the 60 years I spent being the perfect woman. But if my regret can interrupt your autopilot, if my voice can reach you before yours goes quiet, then these years were not wasted entirely. So before you scroll away, before you return to the noise and the demands and the expectations, ask yourself one question, just one.
Where have I been disappearing in my own life? And when you find the answer, be brave enough to stay. If this story resonated with you, take a moment to reflect, share it with someone who needs to hear it, and consider subscribing. Sometimes one honest story is enough to change the direction of a life. I hope you choose yourself sooner than I did.